I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. The tragedy, the murder, the violence in Connecticut that we were all unfortunate to witness, to hear about, to live through, through the reports, has been horrible. And I think myself, parents like myself, all you parents out there who have children in schools are now wondering, could this happen in my school? What protections are in place for my kids when they're not, we all send our kids off to school. They're with other people all day. And I got to think that's something a lot of people are thinking about. So I wanted to talk with the head of North Dakota's public schools, Superintendent, recently elected Superintendent Kirsten Baesler. Kirsten, are you hearing now at this point from parents in the wake of this school shooting asking you, are our kids safe in North Dakota schools?
Absolutely, Rob. First of all, I guess I'd just like to reiterate and just really let everyone know our hearts and our prayers are with those people of Newtown. And I think when we heard of the tragedy on Friday, each and every one of us, as you said, just held our kids a little bit closer and thought, my goodness, that's a community just like mine, a community just like ours, and if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. It is tragic. And yesterday, phones were ringing off the hook in schools all across North Dakota. There were concerned parents, concerned community members. I had several calls from people across the state, media people wondering what is the status of North Dakota schools and how can we do better. And I was really glad to hear that last part of that question of how can we do better, because yes, we do have measures in place. Last legislative session in 2011, it became a bill was passed that made it mandatory for schools in North Dakota to do at least one lockdown drill each year, in addition to the regular tornado and fire drills. And schools are doing that. There are, best practices out there, but as with anything, we can always do better.
Walk us through when you say we have a law in place now, the schools are doing lockdown drills. What exactly does that entail?
Well, each school does develop their own lockdown procedure, their own emergency procedure for what works best for them. Obviously, the configuration of a school, the accessibility of fire and rescue. So it's important for school districts. I'll talk about the two school districts that I'm most familiar with, Mandan Public Schools as the school board president, and then, of course, an employee of the Bismarck Public Schools for 22 years. It's important that each school district work with their fire and police departments, as well as their community health and their emergency rescue systems, to work with those agencies to determine what is going to work best for those responders, those first responders, and the configuration and the floor layout plan of your school. And with those people to develop a plan that's going to work best. The most difficult part of any plan, Rob, I'm going to be very honest with you, is the reunification piece. After the crisis has subsided, and to reunite those children with those parents is probably the most difficult. I have a good friend who is on the school board in Nebraska, and her high school, you may remember a few years ago, Milford South High School had a tragedy like this, and that was the most difficult. They had all the students out on the football field, and they had parents surrounding the football field, but they were trying to reunite each of those students one by one, where it was just absolute chaos. As you or any other parent knows, you want your child in your arms right now. And so that's a piece that you need to, I think, what we need to remember in North Dakota is practice, practice, practice. And we need to make sure that we reassure our children that they're safe. And it will be up to the Department of Public Instruction and the state of North Dakota to provide the resources and the training resources for all 450 plus of our school buildings to feel like they can say to their parents, we're going to keep you safe as we possibly can.
You said that you were glad to hear that people were talking about how to do better. Obviously, we have a legislative session coming up. Any plans for further legislation or appropriations to address this issue?
Well, I don't believe that legislation will be necessary, because I do believe that it's going to be important for each of our local school districts to develop their plan and what is going to work best for their community. So it's going to be hard to have a one-size-fits-all legislative bill. I think the fact that we're doing lockdown drills, that's in legislation, is a good foundation for us to build on. Appropriations, yes. I was visiting with the assistant superintendent and the director of our school and our health and safety safe schools unit of the Department of Public Instruction yesterday. We put out an email to all of our school administrators across the state of North Dakota, offering them resources, inviting them to call the department if they needed any assistance. We are going to, it is my plan and my hope that the department can pull together some of the larger school districts that have some very solid threat assessment processes, some very solid plans and procedures for this type of situation, and develop a template or an example model that our school districts that might not have, a safety coordinator hired by their district, pull those people together. With that, it's going to take some extra personnel resources at the department to get that together. So I would hope in the budget that's been presented to this year's session, there is an appropriation for our Safe Schools unit, and I'm hoping that in light of all this, our legislators will see the importance of making sure that is adequate, that unit and that line of the DPI budget is adequately funded.
One response to this that often comes up, and some schools in the nation have already done it, others are debating whether or not they should do it, is to allow somebody in these schools to be armed, whether it be an armed security guard or allowing a principal to be armed or allowing teachers to be armed. Obviously, it varies from degree to degree, and also allowing people who hold concealed carry weapons permits to carry in these schools. And I think the impetus for a lot of that argument is that it seems like gun-free zones, around schools, around college campuses, are the targets for these attacks again and again. And the idea is that maybe if it's not a gun-free zone, they won't be the targets so often. Is that thinking that could be applied here in North Dakota? Is that something you would support?
My initial response is I would hate to see our school buildings turned from a place of learning and creativity into a place of lockdown, similar to, or an armed security place. I don't think any of us feel real good about going through a metal detector at the airport or even visiting the courthouse to file papers when you're going through a search in a metal detector and you're seeing those guns and weapons. I know I had to file some papers just the other day and went down to the courthouse, and before I was even in, it just doesn't make you feel good. And you see those policemen or those deputy people with their guns strapped to them, and it's an unsettling feeling. And until I see that makes a significant difference, and hear that it makes a significant difference, because again, I'm going to draw on my friend, the school board member from Nebraska. The research, the experts that they called in and said it really doesn't. It does not prevent the tragedies that we're seeing. And so I want to keep North Dakota's school places of learning versus stockade that is manned heavily with firearms.
All right. Well, any further thoughts on this? And again, obviously we have a legislative session coming up, and this is going to, I think, weigh heavily on the minds of everybody heading into the session. And any further thoughts and perhaps any tips for parents about how it's unimaginable that this could happen, to think that this could happen in North Dakota. But then again, I'm sure the people of Nebraska thought it was unimaginable there. I'm sure the people of who sent their kids to Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut thought it was unimaginable as well. So, as parents grapple with this, how should they talk with their legislators? How should they talk with their children? How do parents deal with this?
I think the most important piece, a couple things, just to close with this. Prevention is probably the most important key. identifying that, yes, it can happen anywhere, including North Dakota, to have a process in place where you assess the threat of what a child might hear their friend talking about. There are, in some of the larger school districts in North Dakota, there are text-to-tips where kids or adults can just text in something. There are, times that counselors have been informed of something. There are, in my mind, I know of 2 really near misses in the communities that I've worked in, where because of trained personnel, trained staff, some potentially very tragic situations have been alleviated and have been prevented. That is the key. I think it's important for parents to talk to their children about this in an age-appropriate way, reassure them that they're safe, that there are many, many adults in this state and their communities working hard to keep them safe. I think it's also important for them to communicate. As a school board president, when I would address our new teachers that were starting out the year with us in Mandan schools, and I've been a mentor for teachers across the state, one of the things that I would always tell those new teachers is that there's 100 priorities in your day that you think should be number 1, that are saying to you they should be number 1 or at least number 2. But the litmus test is when those parents drop off their most precious gift at 8:15 in the morning, we have an unwritten promise to do all we can to deliver that child back safely to them at 3:30 at the end of the day, both physically and emotionally. So if you are faced between spending your time and energy on one thing versus another, and that second thing involves keeping a child safe, that is absolutely your priority. We need to remember that. So when we put our focus on and energy on AYP or No Child Left Behind, that we have to remember our first priority is to keep our children safe. And I believe that that is the philosophy and the thought. As I mentioned earlier in the interview, all over North Dakota, principals, superintendents, and teachers were talking about this. It's our number 1 priority. And practice, 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 being ready and prepared in the potentially inevitable situation of something as tragic as this. If we can just be able to react quickly and protect our kids, will be the best thing that we can do for them.
Superintendent Baesler, thanks for your time.
Thank you. I just want to make a commitment to all of the listeners and all of your listeners and all the people of North Dakota that it is my priority, and we will be working hard and focusing on this to improve what we're already doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.